Right now, you might have a drink in your hand, or maybe you're planning on grabbing one later tonight, and honestly, the last time you opened a beer or poured a glass of wine, you probably didn't think twice about it. But what you were actually doing is participating in one of the oldest rituals in human history. In fact, our obsession with getting a little buzzed is older than writing. It's older than farming. It actually predates humanity entirely, because our relationship with alcohol didn't start a few thousand years ago with the first brewery. It started about 10 million years ago on a forest floor in Africa with a tiny primate picking up a piece of rotting fruit, the drunken monkey. Hypothesis: in 2014, UC Berkeley biologist Robert Dudley published a fascinating book called The Drunken Monkey. His argument was brilliant, but simple. When ripe fruit falls from a tree and sits on the ground, the natural sugars inside begin to break down. Yeast gets in, fermentation occurs, and the fruit starts producing small amounts of ethanol, aka alcohol. When our primate ancestors ate this overripe fruit, that ethanol gave them a slight buzz. They had no idea why, but it felt great. More importantly, it provided a massive burst of easy calories. So, over millions of years, we didn't just learn to tolerate alcohol. Our bodies evolutionarily adapted to seek it out. By the time Homo sapiens finally showed up, the craving for alcohol was already hardwired into our DNA. But when did we transition from scavenging accidental alcohol to brewing it on purpose? Beer before bread. For generations, the history books taught us a simple timeline. Humans settled down, invented agriculture, built cities, and eventually, with their leftover grain, they discovered fermentation. Well, recent archaeological discoveries just turned that theory completely upside down. In 2018, researchers excavating the Raqefet Cave near Haifa, Israel, found 13,000-year-old stone mortars carved into the bedrock. When they analyzed the chemical residue inside, they found traces of wheat and barley that had been intentionally soaked, sprouted, and fermented. That is beer, brewed in a cave 13,000 years ago. Here is the kicker. The people who made this, the Natufians, were not farmers. They were nomadic hunter-gatherers. They hadn't invented agriculture yet. They didn't grow the barley. They scavenged it from the wild. Yet, making beer was so deeply important to them that they figured out brewing before they ever figured out how to plant a single crop. The secrets of Göbekli Tepe. About 1,000 years later, in southeastern Turkey, humanity built its very first megastructure, Göbekli Tepe. Massive T-shaped stone pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, were arranged in precise circles and carved with intricate images of wild animals. This monumental engineering project was completed before pottery, before metal tools, and before agriculture. For years, archaeologists wondered, what could possibly motivate nomadic tribes to band together and drag 10-ton stones up a mountain? The answer lay in the giant stone vats found at the site. Chemical testing revealed traces of calcium oxalate, a byproduct of brewing grain. Göbekli Tepe wasn't a town. It was a massive, ancient festival ground. People traveled from hundreds of miles away to perform rituals, feast, and drink massive amounts of beer together. This brings us to a radical question that experts have been debating for decades. Why did humans actually start farming? Patrick McGovern, the world's leading expert on ancient biomolecular archaeology, argues that humans didn't settle down to grow wheat for bread. They settled down to grow grain for beer. Think about it. Making bread is incredibly tedious. It requires grinding, kneading, and baking. Beer is lazy. You soak grain in water, Walk away, and nature does the rest. And let's be real. If you had to convince a nomadic hunter-gatherer to give up their freedom and sweat in a field all day, the promise of a cold, mind-altering beverage is a much stronger motivator than a dry loaf of bread. The ultimate prehistoric recipe. By 7000 BCE, our brewing skills went elite. In the Neolithic village of Jiahu in central China, archaeologists discovered clay jars containing the world's oldest confirmed alcohol recipe. And it wasn't some crude, accidental mash. It was a sophisticated, deliberate cocktail of rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn berries. This wasn't luck. This was early mixology. They knew exactly how to blend flavors for the perfect kick, the fuel that built the pyramids. By the time the Bronze Age rolled around, alcohol wasn't just a luxury. It was the literal engine of civilization. In ancient Egypt, the laborers who built the Great Pyramids weren't paid in gold or silver. They were paid in beer, about 4 to 5 liters a day. That was their actual salary, and it made perfect practical sense. The Nile River was often contaminated, highly dangerous to drink. However, the brewing process made beer a far sterile alternative, effectively keeping people alive when the local water supply couldn't. Let's be honest. If you were sweating your life away in the blistering desert heat, and someone offered you a choice between a sack of silver coins or 5 liters of cold beer, which one are you grabbing? Yeah, exactly. On top of being safe to drink, the fermentation process packed the beverage with vital calories and nutrients. For a laborer dragging massive limestone blocks under a scorching sun, those extra calories were a matter of survival. Beer wasn't just a refreshment. It was literally lunch. Then there was the spiritual connection. The Egyptians were convinced that beer was a divine gift crafted by Osiris himself. It was everywhere, poured as temple offerings, buried in royal tombs, and even written into medical prescriptions. Doctors routinely mixed medicinal herbs into beer to treat everything from digestive issues to severe infections. So a single cup was simultaneously serving as a paycheck, a water purification system, a hearty meal, a medicine, and a prayer. When you look at the grand timeline, the full picture is mind-blowing. 10 million years ago, your primate ancestors were drawn to fermented fruit simply to survive. 13,000 years ago, nomadic tribes were deliberately brewing in caves before they ever planted a single seed. 12,000 years ago, they were likely erecting the first monuments in human history, just to have a communal place to drink. 9,000 years ago, they had master mixology recipes. 5,000 years ago, entire empires were running on it as fuel. Alcohol didn't just appear after we built the modern world. There is a very real chance it's the exact reason we felt compelled to build it in the first place. Every time you open a drink today, you are participating in a ritual that began before our species even had a name. The technology evolved, the ingredients got better, and the glassware got fancier. But the underlying impulse is identical to the one that drove a tiny primate to pick up a piece of rotting fruit from the forest floor 10 million years ago. We just figured out how to do it on purpose. If you want to dive down the rabbit hole on any of this, I've linked all the peer-reviewed research right down in the description.